Hello, I'm Michaela Hamilton. I'm editor-in-chief of the Citadel Press, which is the nonfiction imprint at Kensington Publishing. I'm also the editor for the gentleman sitting at the center of the dais, Charles A. Gardner, the author of a book called Dannemora. You've probably read and possibly watched on TV a lot of information about the very frightening incident in 2015 in which two convicted murderers escaped from a maximum security prison in upstate New York. Nothing that you have seen or heard about that incident compares to the amount of detail and the revelations in Charlie Gardner's book, because he writes from two unique perspectives. One reflects the fact that he has retired from the Corrections Department of New York State after over 25 years as a training officer. His rank was lieutenant. As he said to me this morning, he served 25 years in prison, and we should thank him for that. In addition, Charlie is a lifelong resident of the North Country of New York, and his book is completely eye-opening and showing what the escape of the two prisoners and the sudden influx of thousands of law enforcement professionals did to a small community. Suddenly the residents of upstate New York found that they were prisoners in their own homes. I'll let you hear more about it from the author, Charles A. Gardner.
Good morning. Michaela, thank you. I'm not used to the microphone. I'm always used to kind of projecting right over the microphones and right straight out to the people that are in the hallway going, what is that racket? Good morning, librarians. Thank you for having me here today, folks. As Michaela touched upon, Dannemora is about the June 2015 escape of Richard Matt and David Sweat from New York State's largest maximum security prison. Just think about that for a fraction of a second. How did these two guys get out of a maximum security prison? A prison that's 170 plus years in age. Woo! Got my attention. What really got my attention was the fact that it was all unfolding in my backyard. As the hours went into days, turned into weeks, I watched an influx, as Michaela had said, of the press, the national media, and a small army of law enforcement descend upon the North Country. Now, the North Country is pretty simple up there. Don't have a lot of excitement in North Country. So with the sudden influx of all this, it really makes you take notice without a doubt. What made me and what the driving force behind writing Dannemora was all about was, as the stories unfolded, the national media, what they were disseminating out there for the public to hear, they got a lot of it right, but they were missing a lot of it. As the weeks progressed, I got wrapped around the axle to the point where they were just missing a lot of key factors that need to be told. And that's the story that we're going to tell you in Dannemora. Where does my information come from? As Michaela said, and as I always love to introduce myself, I spent a quarter of a century in prison. That kind of makes a few people stand back when I first introduced myself to them. 25 years I spent in prison. That's kind of strange as itself, to think that I would walk among murderers, serial killers, and assorted of crime bosses, and that's what I did for 25 years. It's quite an industry, and it's the huge industry in northern New York. I started my career in '88 as a prison guard. Now, New York State has a real strange sense of humor when you enter the New York State Department of Corrections. The very first prison you get to go to is closest to your home. That was really fortunate. For me, I went to Clinton Correctional Facility, the setting of Dannemora. After I spent a little bit of time at Clinton Correctional, New York State sends you to wherever the vacancies are. In the case during my era, when I was a prison guard, that was down here in the city, Orange County, Westchester County. Spent a lot of time at Sing Sing, AKA up the river from New York City. All in all, I would be one of 20,000 prison guards working across the state. There's a lot of us out there. But it's a real small family when you put it in perspective, because we keep on crossing paths with each other. It would take me almost 2.5 years to get home. Transfer after transfer, different facilities I would work, until eventually after 2.5 years, I would go home to my home facility in Malone, New York. I would work there for a number of years. The first time I was offered an opportunity to promote through exam, I would take the correctional sergeant exam. With that promotion, on the road again, back downstate. I would be experiencing a couple of different things as a new correctional sergeant. First and foremost, I was no longer one of 20,000. I was one of approximately 1,800 sergeants across the state of New York, first line supervisors. I would also experience my very first female correctional facility. I would also experience my very first Maxi-Max correctional facility, where the inmates are locked down 23 out of 24 hours a day because of disciplinary problems, because of assaults on staff or assaults on other inmates. 2.5, almost 3 years later, I would finally get home. Being happy to be home, one would think that I would just settle down and settle in, but no. I would take the next promotion exam as it was offered, and I would be on the road again as a correctional lieutenant. As a correctional lieutenant, I would start actually down here in the Bronx at Edgecombe Correctional, and then I would start the trek back north again. I would work in the maximum security prison, Bedford Hills in Westchester County, the female max, the only one that's in the state of New York. At this time, as a lieutenant, I was one of 800 across the state. I would be responsible on weekends and holidays for a 200-acre facility, a multi-million-dollar operation. I would be the senior official in that prison. With upwards of 2,000 inmates, I was the cat that was making the calls. It was just at that particular time that I met my lovely wife. Okay? We met actually when I worked in prison. She was not an inmate. She was a staff member. And she's been with me ever since. But we kind of joke because we tell everyone how we met in prison. And again, it kind of sets people back a little bit. And then we give them a half a second to digest, and I say, yeah, she worked in the guidance unit. I was one of the ranking officers there. But it kind of makes people a bit nervous when I tell them that we met in prison. She moved out of the prison business and actually went to work for the local school system as the assistant to the superintendents, where she finished her career. After a few more years as a lieutenant with the New York State Department of Corrections, I would take my last promotion. I would be promoted to what was known as a regional training lieutenant, whereas I oversaw training for the 13 northern facilities in New York State. I was now one of 4 in the state that held that position. My job was to oversee the training for both security as well as civilian staff members. There was approximately 6,000 of those staff members that I oversaw their training. I was a liaison between those 13 northern facilities and the Albany Training Academy. That's where I retired from. So with regards to knowing probably just about as much as you're going to know about the inside of a prison, I'm probably the guy that could probably give you the guided tour and know what he's talking about. Dannemora is also set in the beautiful Adirondack Mountains, the Adirondack Park, 6 million acres of forever wild. If you've ever traveled to the Adirondacks, it is breathtakingly beautiful. If you're watching the current Ben Stiller series right now, Escape from Dannemora, all those shots are taken from the Adirondacks. It is absolutely beautiful. but is as beautiful as the Adirondacks can be. They can be as treacherous. This is where the escape actually takes place, is in the Adirondack Mountains and in the foothills of the Adirondacks. When that small army of law enforcement starts to wiggle through the North Country, they're wiggling through brooks, streams, and heavy timber, looking for two guys who don't want to be found. I've lived so far in the Adirondacks. It's my home, it's my backyard. And for me to tell you this story, it's quite easy to tell you about what goes on in one's backyard. So that's the second perspective that I brought to the writing of Dannemora. The third perspective was real easy. Majority of the characters, the persons that are in the book, Dannemora, I know them. It's easy to write about people that you've worked with, worked for, known for years, because you know everything about them. You know how they conducted themselves on the job, you know how well they supervised, and you know how they conducted themselves during the escape. This book is about my neighbors. For me, it's a pretty easy write, because I'm talking about what I did for a living, where I lived, and the people that I lived there with. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed writing it. Thank you.